Hi, my name is Michael Crow, and I will be talking about W.E.B. Du Bois's criteria for Negro art. Before we get into that, I'd like to talk about a brief background on Du Bois. So his full name is William Edward Burghardt Du Bois. He was born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts in 1868. His parents were Alfred and Mary Sylvina Du Bois, and in 1870 his father left William, leaving him in his mother's care. In 1880, Du Bois' mom suffered a stroke and she died later in 1885. When he was living in Great Barrington, William was treated fairly well. There was not much racism there. It was a largely European population. However, when he attended Fisk University from 1885 through 1888, which is in Nashville, Tennessee, that's where he first experienced racism. Um, and that racism came in the form of the Jim Crow laws, of Southern bigotry, suppression of black votes, and lynchings. However, in 1888, he started attending Harvard for his second bachelor's degree, and in 1890 he graduated in history with cum laude. And in 1892 he received a fellowship for the University of Berlin for the John F. Slater Fund for the Education of Freedmen. And there he studied under prominent social scientists, including Gustav von Schmoller, Adolf Wagner, and Heinrich von Treitschke. In 1909, he's one of the co-founders of the NAACP, and one of his roles with that is that he is the editor of The Crisis, which was a journal of the NAACP that published many influential pieces that attacked racism and promoted the advancement of colored people. In 1963, he passed away at the age of 95. So the criteria for Negro art was originally spoken by Du Bois at a celebration for the 12th Spigerin Award winner, Carter Woodson. And the Spigerin Award is an NAACP award for outstanding achievement by an African American. And this was later published in The Crisis of October 1926. So the first theme that Du Bois talks about is the definition of beauty. And this first quote is about a personal experience of his where he was on an excursion to a lake, and this lake was the subject of a piece that he had studied in high school. It was Scott's Lady of the Lake, and when he went, it was something that he knew by heart. So going to this lake to see it in person was a very emotional and spiritual experience for him, and he was able to appreciate the beauty. The excursionists he's referring to in this quote are the people he was with on this trip. So he says the excursionists were mostly Americans, and they were loud and strident. They carried perhaps a sense of strength and accomplishment, but their hearts had no conception of the beauty which pervaded this holy place. That was in paragraph 5. So what he's saying here is that the Americans are so caught up in their own lives to really take the time of day to pay attention to the lake that they're in and notice its beauty. They're just overlooking it. It's going missed by them, unnoticed. And so it really poses the question of who defines beauty. Do they define beauty? Because they're completely missing it. They're missing an extremely beautiful lake, not even paying attention to it. So he suggests that we black folks may help, for we have within us as a race new stirrings of the beginning of a new appreciation of joy, of a desire to create, of a will to be. So he's saying here is that because African Americans are, not on top of society because of racism, they're pretty much at the bottom at this point, that they can see through the problems of society and that they can really appreciate beauty because of that. They'll have an eye for it and they can create it. That leads to the third quote, which he says, "Thus it is the bounden duty of Black America to begin this great work of the creation of beauty." And he says this leading into the next theme that he talks about, or that he touches on in this piece. And that second theme that he talks about is that all art is propaganda. He explicitly says this in paragraph 26, where he says, "Thus all art is propaganda and ever must be, despite the wailing of the purists." He continues by saying, "I do not care a damn for any art that is not used for propaganda, but I do care when propaganda is confined to one side while the other is stripped and silent." What he's saying here is that it's pretty straightforward that art should be used as propaganda, and that African American art should be used to elevate their position in society, to give them a voice where they can voice their culture, their experiences, and highlight the injustices that they face in the racist society that they exist in. There's just one problem with that, which he talks about for the next point of this piece of his. So the final theme that Du Bois talks about is that the beauty of African American art is often overlooked. And this first quote says that we have had many voices of all kinds as fine as Roland Hayes's, and America was and is as deaf as she was for years to him. Then a foreign land heard Hayes and put its imprint on him, and America with all its imitative snobbery woke up. That was in paragraph 23. So Roland Hayes was a musician who, as can be gathered from Du Bois's quote, started off in America and didn't do very well. There was even one point where he put down $200 of his own money to rent out a theater hall to perform at because he wasn't able to get a sponsor. So it's pretty clear that he wasn't doing too well in America. Then he traveled to Europe, and that's when people started hearing him. The Europeans started hearing him. He even got a summons to go perform for King George V and Queen Mary. And from then on, America recognized his talent, and he was a star. So that's sort of what Du Bois is talking about, is that it took a while for Roland Hayes' work to be recognized as beautiful, as quality art. It took a different country to recognize it before America was able to realize his talent. And that goes into the next quote where he says, "I do not doubt that the ultimate art coming from black folk is going to be just as beautiful as the art that comes from white folk. But the point today is that until the art of black folk compels recognition, that it will not be rated human." So that's the whole point of this piece, is that Du Bois is saying that African Americans are able to produce this beautiful work that can be used as propaganda to help elevate their position in society so that they're not at the bottom anymore, that they're treated equally. However, the problem with this is that it might take a long time for them to be recognized just because they're African Americans, that America will overlook their work based on their skin color. And it'll take a while, but if everything goes according as it did for Roland Hayes, we just keep working at it, that maybe their work will be recognized one day. It will compel that recognition so that it will be rated as human. It will be, seen as a decent piece of art, as a beautiful piece of art, which it isn't at this current time, which it usually isn't at this current time. So to conclude, in this piece, Du Bois talks about what is the definition of beauty and suggests that African Americans, given their position in society, are in a good position to, be able to see and define what is beauty. And because of this, he believes that, art produced by African Americans should be used as propaganda, as a way to secure their rights, to elevate their position in society, to be treated equal. The only problem with this is the third theme that he talks about, is that oftentimes African American art is judged differently because it's produced by someone who is black, given due to the racist ideals that exist during this time period. So that was something that artists will have to overcome, that as a society they'll have to push through. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you very much for listening.